Sa'dia Rehman. Thank you so much for joining me at Artists Talk, a podcast by KODA. It's wonderful to have you here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So, the first question I have to you is about your origins as an artist. When did you start making art, and how maybe was that helpful in the moment for you?
When did I start? I often think about this as what's my origin story because I mean it sounds like I'm a superhero, like a Marvel superhero, but um I often go back to this because it helps me to see where I come from. And so I started making art very young. And I kind of knew that I wanted to be an artist when I was 12. And it was because a seventh grade art teacher really supported me. And you know, um, she had me, um, make make things, or she had some great assignments. And sometimes, like, I would go there after school, and she would like, stay after school with me, and lots of ceramic pieces, so very sculptural. And so I think that's where my kind of root is in sculpture and 3D. Um, and then in seventh grade, at the end of the year, um, she had awarded me some art award, which I still have, like a little plaque with my name on it. And so that was where I kind of knew. And then in high school, I kept doing art. I was always in the art room, and I loved all my art teachers. Um, and yeah, I think that's it.
And if you think back to that time when you were 12 and then later in high school, how has your practice evolved? Because you keep making sculptures and installations.
Hmm. I, it's funny because the first work that I can think of in that seventh grade class was a book bag. I had made a book bag out of clay, and also glazed it gold. And that teacher, I couldn't take it. I couldn't take it home because it was just too big, and I knew it was like, where are we going to put this? And so she took it and she put it in her. She had a home upstate. I didn't know what upstate was at the time, but she had a home in upstate, and she said, I'm going to put this book bag, on my trail so that I can see it on my, walks in the morning. But thinking about that book bag, or even that kind of shape, that continues to come back in my practice, the vessel. Um, be it, with the kind of vessel that I kind of think about, that I had made after high school is several teacups. And it was just a repeated form of teacups. And then if we kind of think about my practice today, the boat um, is symbolic of the vessel. And so, yeah, I think that's
So
what's
it's
evolved.
eh, I don't know how accurate you would find it, but it's what came to my mind is like a vessel of erased history. Because my next question to you is about how does it feel like? What is it like to make work about erased history?
Hmm. What I'm remembering about you is that you ask the best questions. Um, yes. Oh, what is it? It's really hard, obviously, because um, these are histories that are very close to my heart. It's my family's story, and so I. But a lot of the stories that I have been hearing from my family through oral storytelling have been really devastating in that, and the story is of the displacement. They were forced to move out of their village because a hydroelectric dam needed to be constructed in the 1960s. And this was the Tarbela Dam on the Indus River. And um, so they had lived in that village, several years, several generations, and they were pushed out for this hydroelectric dam to be built. And a lot of the cousins, uncles, aunts are still living. And so, in that way, I feel like I'm working with a living history, which has been erased out of public um, documents. And so, what that means to me is that, you know, perhaps this history is still here. And so, it's in the body. It's sensorial, you can feel it, and so you're just living with it in some way.
And what was it like to create work around the Tarbela Dam? And it was the um, the core of the exhibition that we worked on together in 2023. But I'm wondering about the process of creating those works and thinking about that
Mhm.
that history and the memory.
Um, so this kind of story of the family being displaced has been, um it's been told to me since I was a young child. And we also had gone I've been to Pakistan since I was a child and continue to go, and so we would actually go to the dam because it is a celebrated, kind of national, monument, and it's also celebrated as a civil feat of engineering, like most dams. So if you kind of think about the Hoover Dam here in the US, that's like a tourist destination. And so I, um so I have been living with this story for quite some time, and I have a sister who's a writer, Bushra Rehman, and she has also been writing about um, this displacement. And so visually, I think I was always making work about loss. And so even like thinking about this book bag, it's like a singular object. It was an empty book bag. We're going back to the seventh grade. Even these teacups that I had made this is now undergraduates. And so even these teacups, they were empty vessels, and they were kind of scooped, made of plaster. And then this um, image of the boat or the vessel, that's also in some ways an empty, symbolic um, object and functional object. And so, mm, yeah, I mean, I think it was hard to make work, but I think it had to be made because, as I had mentioned, it's a thing that I live with every day. Through hearing the stories, but then also, I think, trauma is carried through generations. So as an artist, I felt like I had to just make the work. Yeah.
And you, yes, similarly to kind of the repetition happens, right? Like with the
Mm.
trauma being carried over through generations, repetition also happens in your work and in your process. So I wonder how does that gesture make it or help you make it to the final
Mhm.
piece?
Yeah, I mean, I think just the other day I was doing some contour drawings. Um, and as I was doing this, oftentimes like drawing slows down the moment or the image for me. And so in that way, repetition for me does the same thing where it it just slows down me, studying the memory or, studying the object. And so repeating either, I don't know, an image of, for me, the image of the collapsed gravestones or the rubble that I had seen last time I was at the Indus River, which was 2022, which was right before the exhibition I had at KODA. Um, that's such a, striking and real and um, poignant and sad image to see the rubble, to see, these gravestones that are usually, 9 months out of the year, they're submerged underwater. And this is in 2022, I had gone to search for my father's village. And so I didn't get to find his village, but when the water is very low, I could see and it was low when I had gone. Um, I could see just markings of walls. And at that time, I saw just a full cemetery and concaved, um, broken, cement and markers of graves. And so in that way, that image keeps coming back into my head. Um, and so I feel like drawing it or making sculptures of those stones or that rubble helps me connect with both the feeling but also the memory.
In some, I remember some of the graves are marked with like
Mhm.
kind of almost flags or a pole with the clothes around it to
Right.
indicate where the family can come visit.
Mhm.
So and in some of those pieces where you speak to the experience being there at low tide, there's also there's the repetition, but there's also erasure, which
Mhm.
is a repetitive gesture in your work as well. I wonder if you could speak a bit to that.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, in some ways, I'm making the mark and then also I'm playing with those 2 things, making the mark, but then also having it be erased. And something that I can kind of think of, a work that I can think of is my monoprint series that I had made, and it's still being made. It's just an ongoing work right now called Alphabet of Grief. And it's a monoprint where I have, inked the plate. Um, so I inked the plate and then um, placed a piece of paper directly on the inked plate and just from memory I draw with a stylus on a piece of paper that's between the ink plate and the stylus. And in that way, I'm picking up the ink, but also drawing. And then I take that plate and put it through the press. And so it kind of creates a transfer image. So I'm making the line, then also erasing the line. So what happens with those lines that I had drawn on that paper with the stylus, um, it makes those kind of contour lines. And this is not something that I had made. It's like made up or it's it's a pretty common monoprint technique, like transfer monoprint. And so um that's something that I kind of can think about in that way. But even my use of stencils, so cutting out an image from a stencil, oftentimes they're figurative. Oftentimes they're images of my family based on photographs. And so I make a stencil out of that. But then I use that stencil as a tool of making. And so I push charcoal through it or ink, um, or spray paint
Or light.
or light. Yes, or light. So yeah, I don't know. I like those opposites in some ways.
And I'm thinking also about another thing that I feel you do quite often, which is the site specificity.
Mm.
So even if you, like I've seen images mostly of some of your works in different exhibitions and in museums and you in alternative spaces,
Mhm.
and you really like drawing on the walls and just incorporating your work into the architecture or architect like letting the architecture hold your work and kind of help you present it.
Mhm.
I'm wondering with the exhibition that we did together at KODA in 2023, Desire Lines, how did that, or how did site specificity manifest?
Mhm. Um, hmm. Yeah. I mean, I think like, we worked together on that show. And so I felt like it was a collaborative effort in terms of the site specificity. Um, we also, well, first of all, yeah, so Governor's Island, to get to Governor's Island, you have to take a ferry. I loved that ferry ride. And so you're crossing a body of water. Um, and so I think we thought about that in terms of what does it mean for this work to be in the Coda house. Um, and there were moments where so the work that was exhibited were some monoprints, and then um, also when I was describing the alphabet of grief, it was those pieces of papers, that striation of the work. Um, and so we were thinking about the doorways in the house, and I felt like we had to block some type of entryway or viewership. Um, and I remember us talking about how we wanted the work to be viewed, and so you had the brilliant idea of placing it on the ground, which I loved, and also on the wood. Um, and yeah, so this wood, which I'm not remembering the type of wood it was. Was it plywood or maple? We tried to get wood, I think,
Yeah,
but I think it was maple wood.
I can't remember. I wasn't it plywood?
What?
Or it was, I mean, it's possible that it wasn't.
Yeah,
Have to check.
yeah. I mean, I think I'm can't believe that I'm forgetting, but we thought about every single moment of that. Um, yeah, how the work was going to be viewed, but also what the work was doing in the space, and how those lines on those like document size paper were being viewed with the cracks in the wall and the peeling paint and the windows. I also remember um, placing work on the wall, kind of like they were two works that were adjacent to one another, but it was beyond the works that were on kind of like the wood pedestals. And I remember saying I didn't want people to go up so close. They had to kind of view it from a bridge or this like bridge of works that were on the floor. Um, yeah, that is
It was almost like a river passing like
right.
through.
Mhm.
And we definitely did work on challenging the viewer a bit and
Mhm.
showing the work in an unusual way. It was elevated a bit like on bricks that were hidden, so it looked like it was floating just
Mhm.
a bit off the ground.
Right.
And that was like one of my favorite installations because we had like installation time
Mhm.
because we somehow had so much time to work on it and to
Mhm.
work with the space and be in the space and like try things out and envision the interaction. So it was good to have that time.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, and also I there was also a video, my two-channel video.
Yes,
Um,
and painted. Or
yes, in the black box.
yeah.
Oh, that was this. Yeah. So, um, yeah, I think that was like a collaborative kind of site responsive um exhibition. And also just thinking about what Governor Island was or was it was like a Navy base, US Navy base. And so a lot of the families of the um officers were living in those buildings. So even thinking about that kind of past life, like having the work in a home that's now used as something else. Yeah.
And um, the also the fact that currently like on Governor's Island it's quiet and peaceful. You do have to get there by boat, but then the only noise that you get sometimes are the
The
helicopters above the
helicopter.
ground.
Yeah.
And then in your works there were helicopters, those that were informing people
Mhm.
with flyers of the helicopters to just
Mhm.
move because they're getting displaced.
Right.
So that was also a very powerful moment, like realizing that this is happening in that space.
Mhm.
And I have a question about your the title of that exhibition, Desire Lines, because I feel like one at some point we had a conversation about you liking your exhibition titles to be long.
Yes. I think it was a phase. It was a phase.
It was a very interesting thing about challenging like institutions with, you know, the guy like they might have design constraints, so they want a shorter title.
Mhm.
Um, so it was a way of institutional critique as well. Design Lines was a short title, but then in parallel you had some other longer titles
Mhm.
in other exhibitions.
Yes. Yeah. That longer title was based on a poem by my sister. Yep. Mm.
So a good collaboration as well,
Mm.
and it's great that you're able to do that together. Um, I wonder, still, you know, on this topic or any other works that you would like to bring in or series, how do you make sure that the work stays connected to the people rather than becoming too abstract?
Yes, because abstraction, it could be um, a way of erasing. Um, that's a good question. Well, there's a lot of safekeeping, and I think because it's not it's not only my story, it's, my family's story, and um so there's a lot of safekeeping and a lot I often think about um how abstraction and extraction is connected. And so, you know, it could be very extractive to kind of take this story and make artwork out of it in a different, you know, country and take this story that happened in Pakistan and then, display it in the US. And so I often think about that protection and how I'm telling the story. And so, in that way, it doesn't become so abstract. And and yeah, I often think about how they were displaced, and how they were displaced was because this hydroelectric dam needed to be built, in quotes. Um, and it was funded by the World Bank. And so the World Bank consists of, um, you know, the US, Germany, Japan, the UK, France, and so what has been called the global north. Um, and so I often turn my lens towards that, and like, how did it happen? And um, how did the displacement happen, and who financed it? And I think about the protests, and right now I'm digging through lots of contracts in the World Bank archives. And so I'm going back to that history. Um, and I feel like, doing that work and bringing that story um, to my family, and like, how did that happen and why did that happen? Um, it does, I've had conversations with them, and it does kind of, um, make us think about and have more discussion about, the family and how and where they are now. Um, and they were, resettled in an area in Pakistan about maybe 50 or 60 miles away from where they used to live.
I just remembered also that you started being in conversation with Tarbela Dam around like when the exhibition was happening. Did that go anywhere? Like, did you
Oh,
continue
you mean the
on social
Instagram?
media? Yeah.
It's still happening. Yeah,
Oh,
it's
really?
still happening. I mean, yeah, for me, like, going somewhere it's just, I like to pace myself, and I like kind of the long engagements or the long relationships. And so, um, yeah, there was someone on social media who had, it's a I'm forgetting the handle, but it does have Tarbela Dam in it. And they had messaged me when the show was up and invited me to, have a tour. I haven't been back since 2022, but I'm planning to go again this year. And um yeah, the conversation continues.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so the last I think, aspect of this work that you started developing that I want to ask about is the tent-like structure
Mhm.
that you started envisioning I probably long time ago, and then s- began working on an aspect of it during your residency with KODA when your exhibition was on view. Your studio was also there, and it was somewhat part of the exhibition that it was this
Mhm.
evolving structure. Can you just tell a bit about the history of that tent, but also the reception of it, kind of like how
Right.
maybe you got some, like comments that it did anything kind of affect that, any aspect of that work?
Mhm. That's funny that you bring that tent piece up because I just out of my storage to kind of look at it again. And it's basically like a singular, maybe 10-foot piece, I think. Yeah, 10-foot fabric piece, and it's just on cotton. It's white cotton fabric, and what I had done was um, I had rusted rebar on it. So, the construction rebar that kind of holds cement. So, thinking about the bones of a large structure like a dam. And so, on that 10-foot fabric, I had rusted several pieces of rebar, placing them and replacing them. And they would kind of rust over time and create this mark of the rebar on this white cotton fabric, and then I had hung it at a slant in, the studio that I was in, um, and I think I had invited people to go under, and I think we also had a conversation under it. We had, like, pillows set up, and we had talked under it or something, maybe. I kinda remember that. I don't know. I remember that image, but my mem
I definitely was in the tent under
Yeah.
the structure. I
Yeah.
can't remember if we had a conversation there, but I do
Well,
remember
yeah.
looking for pillows. For
Right. Well, I think I wanted that,
yeah,
like, it to
yeah.
be a tent that is, that becomes kind of alive with conversation, and so there were some visitors who we had kind of ducked under and had conversations, and it was, just chatting and catching up and that kind of stuff. But I wanted to kind of see what this kind of slanted cotton structure does because the light was also shining through the weaves of that cotton. And I think the rust was peeking through on the other side. So one side was, darker rust, and then the other was just like a remnant. Um, So, yeah, I mean, I took that out just last week to kind of study it and see what's happening there. Yeah, and that was like 3 years ago.
3 years ago now. And well, why the tent? It's because the tents were given out to your family members and people who were displaced as a temporary kind of
Mhm.
home. And yes, and I'm curious to see where that tent like structure takes you. I'm glad to hear that it's
Mhm.
out of your storage now and that you're spending time with it.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, I'm curious too. I don't know where it will go. I have no answers, yeah, to this question, but yeah.
Okay. Is there anything else you'd like to talk about?
Hmm. Anything else I would like to talk about?
Well,
Well, I mean, I would like to, well, thank you. I mean, thank you for this conversation, but also just like,
yeah.
we've known each other for a few years now, and I always enjoy talking to you, and your questions are always they leave me silent, but I had to answer these questions.
Yeah, you do.
And one of the other reasons I became an artist was like I didn't want to talk about support, but here we are. Um, that's a joke. What I also wanted to say is that I loved the collaboration, and I think it was one of my first true collaborations with a curator, and I carry that with me. Um, and I seek that in in curators. And I know, there's lots of things that kind of would block that kind of relationship, but just in the last year, I had a solo show at the Loeb Art Center um, on Vassar campus college, and so in Poughkeepsie, New York, and I had worked with a curator collaboratively, just like this, and I really love that relationship. So just, that first time, collaborating with a curator, was really wonderful. Yeah,
Oh, thank
and I'm
you.
so glad it was with you. Yeah.
Thank you for saying that. I loved our collaboration as well, and I hope it continues into the future, and that and whenever you need that type of kind of I don't know if it's support or collaboration in your work, that it happens for you, and it's been a pleasure, and thank you so much for joining me on the podcast and sharing a bit about that journey as well.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.